You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. When we revisit the topic of motivations behind cyber attacks, it helps to start with a recap of the primary categories we explored earlier. These include financial, political, ideological, and personal drivers. Each category represents a different why behind malicious activity, and they differ significantly in both goals and methods. Financially motivated actors are drawn to profit, often through theft or fraud. Political actors, particularly state-sponsored groups, pursue long-term strategic advantage. Ideological actors focus on protest and disruption, while personal motivations stem from individual grievances or desires. Recognizing these differences at a high level is essential, because they shape everything from target selection to persistence. Although these four categories provide a useful foundation, they do not capture the full picture. Cyber threats increasingly operate within larger economic ecosystems that extend beyond any single category. For example, supply chain exploitation is a motivation in itself, allowing attackers to reach multiple downstream victims by compromising a single vendor. Similarly, resale markets on the dark web provide incentives for attackers to steal data not for direct use, but because they can sell it to others. These ecosystem motivations highlight how cybercrime has matured into a networked economy. This economic ecosystem changes how we think about intent. An attacker compromising a logistics provider, for instance, may not care about the company's internal data. Instead, they may exploit that position to access the provider's clients. Similarly, stolen medical records may hold no direct value for the thief, but become valuable in resale markets where other criminals can purchase and exploit them. The motivation here is less about direct use of the data and more about leveraging the role of middleman or supplier in a wider economy. That shift requires defenders to broaden their perspective beyond immediate threats. One of the most impactful developments within this ecosystem is the rise of secondary markets, such as malware-as-a-service platforms. These platforms enable actors with little technical expertise to launch campaigns that would once have required highly skilled developers. The motivation for the service providers is financial. They profit from renting or selling their tools. The motivation for the customers is access to capabilities they could not otherwise develop. This creates a layered market where roles are specialized, mirroring legitimate industries. The end result is that a broader range of attackers, from hobbyists to organized crime, can participate. The implications of these secondary markets are significant. They democratize access to cyber capabilities in a way that lowers barriers and increases overall activity. A person with minimal coding skills can subscribe to a phishing kit or rent a botnet, turning them into an attacker overnight. This outsourcing model not only fuels volume but also raises the stakes for defenders, who must prepare for attacks coming from a much wider pool of participants. Understanding these markets as motivators shows how financial incentives ripple outward, enabling a cascade of other motives to be acted upon more easily. The geopolitical landscape also plays a major role in shaping motivations. When tensions rise between countries, state-sponsored activity tends to escalate. Motivations here are tied to national interest, gathering intelligence, influencing global perception, or destabilizing rival economies. Unlike financially motivated actors who may be deterred by increased costs, state actors are often motivated by strategic imperatives that override traditional cost-benefit logic. Geopolitical motivations elevate the likelihood of highly resourced, long-term campaigns, which can impact both government and private sector organizations. Even seemingly apolitical companies may find themselves caught in the crossfire because their industry touches on critical supply chains. Understanding this geopolitical motivation is important for defenders who might otherwise underestimate their exposure. A manufacturer supplying defense contractors may assume they are not a direct target, but in the eyes of a state actor, they become a crucial stepping stone. Likewise, research institutions working on emerging technologies may be targeted not for financial reasons, but because their work has national security implications. This shows how political motivations often extend beyond the obvious and require organizations across many sectors to consider themselves potential targets of state-aligned campaigns. Another area where motivations become complex is in competitive intelligence. Organizations legitimately conduct market research and competitor analysis, but in some cases the boundary between legal activity and cyber espionage blurs. Companies may be tempted to acquire intellectual property, trade secrets, or sensitive client data through illegitimate means. While this is distinct from nation-state espionage, the motive is similar, gaining advantage over rivals. The mix of legitimate and illegitimate motives in this area complicates detection, since some intelligence gathering may appear benign, while others cross ethical or legal lines. Competitive intelligence as a motivation matters because it underscores the idea that not all cyber threats originate from criminals or governments. Businesses themselves, especially in industries with fierce competition, may sponsor or encourage unethical practices. Even when organizations do not actively commission such activity, employees or contractors may pursue it on their own. This blending of legitimate and illegitimate motives requires defenders to be cautious in how they assess risk. Attacks may come from competitors, not just shadowy cybercriminal groups or distant nation-states. Recognizing this expands the spectrum of who might be considered a potential adversary. Ideological actors, meanwhile, continue to rely heavily on publicity and disruption to achieve their goals. These groups thrive on attention, using defacement, leaks, or denial of service campaigns to push their messages into the public sphere. Their motivation is often not to cause long-term damage, but to spark conversation or draw attention to their cause. In this sense, their attacks function more like digital protests than sustained campaigns. Yet, as history shows, even symbolic actions can have real-world consequences, particularly when they erode trust, disrupt services, or shape public opinion. The effectiveness of these publicity-driven attacks lies in their ability to capture narrative space. A hacktivist group may not have the resources of a nation-state, but by timing an attack with a political protest or anniversary, they can amplify their message globally. For defenders, ideological motivation emphasizes the need to monitor not just technical vulnerabilities, but also the cultural or political events that may trigger attacks. Understanding that timing is driven by symbolic significance helps organizations prepare for heightened risk windows tied to social movements or geopolitical events. Criminal diversification adds another layer of motivation. Attackers rarely stick to a single revenue stream. Instead, they expand into extortion, data theft, and account takeover chains. For example, a group that initially specialized in ransomware may later branch into credential theft, which they can sell or use for secondary fraud. This diversification mirrors legitimate businesses seeking multiple revenue sources. The motivation is to maximize profit while reducing dependency on a single tactic. As markets evolve, attackers adapt, seeking new opportunities wherever they appear most lucrative. This diversification increases the complexity of defending against financially motivated groups. Because criminals shift tactics, defenders cannot rely on a single defensive posture. A company that protects itself against ransomware may still be vulnerable to account takeovers or stolen data being resold. Criminal groups evaluate which methods provide the highest return for the least risk, much like entrepreneurs. Their flexibility in pursuing multiple motivations at once makes them resilient in the face of law enforcement pressure or improved defenses. Tracking this diversification is essential for anticipating emerging threats. Motivation also directly influences the complexity of operations. A curious insider acting alone may attempt a simple attack, while a nation-state conducting espionage may design a multifaceted, multi-year campaign involving custom malware, social engineering, and supply chain compromises. The greater the stakes of the motivation, the more complex the operation tends to be. Complexity becomes a signal that defenders can use to infer motivation. A highly coordinated, stealthy campaign is more likely tied to political or espionage motives than to casual curiosity. Finally, motivation can be understood through the lens of return on investment, ROI. Just as businesses weigh cost against benefit, attackers do the same. They assess how much effort, risk, and resources are required compared to the potential payoff. A phishing campaign targeting thousands of users may have a low individual success rate but offers high overall return because it requires little effort. In contrast, infiltrating a government agency may require years of preparation but promises intelligence of immense value. By modeling attacker ROI, defenders can anticipate which targets are most attractive to specific motivations. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Ransomware has become one of the most prominent examples of how economics drive rapid growth in specific attack types. The extortion model is straightforward. Encrypt a victim's data and demand payment for the decryption key. The profitability of this scheme has fueled its proliferation, with organized groups developing sophisticated operations around it. In many ways, ransomware epitomizes the alignment of technical capability with financial incentive. Attackers refine their methods, target sectors most likely to pay, and continually innovate with tactics such as double extortion, where stolen data is threatened with public release. The motivation here is clear: maximize returns by applying pressure points that organizations cannot ignore. The economic success of ransomware has also encouraged specialization within criminal ecosystems. Some actors focus exclusively on developing the malware, while others handle distribution or negotiation. Underground forums even feature third-party services that launder ransom payments. This division of labor mirrors legitimate business models, complete with customer support and service guarantees. Each participant in the ecosystem is motivated by financial gain, and the overall effect is a resilient, scalable industry. Defenders who understand this economic motivation see that countering ransomware is not just about stopping malware, but about disrupting an entire supply chain of incentives. For defenders, the key lesson is that ransomware thrives because it delivers consistent ROI for attackers. If victims continue to pay, attackers remain motivated to persist. Breaking this cycle requires coordinated responses, including improved backups, public refusal to pay, and law enforcement disruption of infrastructure. By undermining the profitability of the model, defenders can shift attacker motivation. This demonstrates how understanding the economic logic behind attacks can inform strategies that aim not only to block intrusions but to dismantle the incentives that sustain them. Beyond ransomware, botnets and distributed denial of service (DDoS) services offer attackers low-cost options for disruption. Renting access to a botnet provides the capability to flood a target with traffic, overwhelming its ability to respond. These services are often inexpensive and marketed in underground forums as easy-to-use tools, sometimes even with hourly pricing models. The motivation for attackers is straightforward. For a modest investment, they can take down or cripple services, often at critical moments. The existence of such services lowers the barrier for anyone with disruptive intent, from ideological actors to business competitors. What makes DDoS services particularly compelling is their scalability. An attacker does not need to compromise thousands of devices personally. They can simply rent time on a botnet already assembled by someone else. This reflects the same commoditization trend seen in ransomware and phishing kits. The motivation for service providers is profit, while the motivation for customers is the ability to cause disruption without technical expertise. Defenders must therefore recognize that disruptive attacks may come not only from advanced actors, but from anyone with access to these low-cost tools. For organizations, this reality highlights the importance of resilience planning. DDoS mitigation services, redundant infrastructure, and clear communication strategies become vital when facing an environment where attacks can be ordered as easily as a food delivery. Understanding the motivation behind such attacks' low cost, high impact allows defenders to anticipate when and why they might be targeted. For example, online retailers may see increased risk during peak sales events, while government agencies may face attacks during politically sensitive periods. Motivation provides the lens for predicting timing and preparing countermeasures. Another factor in the economic ecosystem is the role of data brokers who increase the value of stolen datasets. Criminal groups know that certain information, such as personal identifiers, credit card numbers, or login credentials, has a ready market. Data brokers aggregate and resell this information, often bundling it into packages for specific buyers. Their motivation is purely financial, but their existence amplifies the incentives for initial theft. Even if attackers cannot use the data themselves, they know there is a dependable resale channel. This makes data theft a reliable and repeatable business model within cybercrime. The presence of data brokers creates ripple effects for defenders. The value of a stolen dataset is not just in its immediate exploitation, but in its repeated circulation across multiple markets. One breach can fuel a cascade of further compromises as the same credentials or records are resold. Attackers are motivated not only to steal, but to keep the pipeline of valuable data flowing. Defenders, therefore, must treat data protection as a long-term safeguard, recognizing that compromised information may resurface repeatedly in different contexts, long after the original incident is closed. Insider recruitment is another dimension of motivation that cannot be overlooked. External actors may recognize that achieving their goals, whether financial, political, or competitive, requires help from someone inside the target organization. By recruiting or coercing insiders, attackers bypass many technical defenses. Motivations here vary. Insiders may be offered financial incentives, respond to ideological appeals, or act out of personal grievances. From the attacker's perspective, the motivation is efficiency. Why spend months developing exploits when an insider can provide direct access? This motivation drives both criminal and state-sponsored campaigns. Defenders must therefore monitor not only for technical intrusions, but also for behavioral anomalies among employees and contractors. Recognizing the motivation to recruit insiders means placing emphasis on training, reporting channels, and background checks. It also involves fostering a culture where employees feel valued and less susceptible to outside persuasion. Motivation here reminds us that security is not solely a technical problem, but a human one, shaped by relationships, trust, and opportunity. The attacker's motivation to recruit is best countered by the defender's motivation to support and protect their workforce. Motives can also shift mid-campaign as attackers discover unexpected value. An attacker who initially compromises a system for financial gain might stumble upon sensitive political data and change course. Conversely, a politically motivated group might sell stolen financial information to fund further operations. This fluidity highlights that motivation is not always static. Just as businesses pivot when they discover new markets, attackers adapt when circumstances present better opportunities. Defenders must account for this flexibility, recognizing that motivation analysis is not a one-time exercise but an ongoing process. The role of automation further magnifies motivated attacks. Automation allows attackers to scale operations with minimal additional effort. For example, phishing campaigns can be automated to target thousands of users, with software handling responses and credential harvesting. The motivation is clear. Automation increases ROI by reducing manual workload while maximizing reach. This also means that once a tool is created, it can be reused or resold indefinitely, reinforcing the economic incentives. Defenders must therefore anticipate not just one-off attacks but campaigns that are continuously refined and repeated at scale. Monitoring signals that correlate with monetization attempts is one of the most practical applications of motivation analysis. For instance, unusual outbound traffic to known cryptocurrency wallets may indicate ransomware activity, while spikes in credential stuffing attacks suggest financial motives. By mapping behaviors to likely motivations, defenders can improve detection and response. This does not eliminate the need for technical defenses, but enhances them with context. Motivation gives meaning to data. It transforms raw indicators into a story about what attackers want and where they might strike next. Legal and regulatory factors can also alter attacker incentives. For example, Stricter anti-money laundering rules may make it harder to cash out stolen funds, decreasing the attractiveness of certain schemes. Conversely, geopolitical sanctions may encourage states to pursue cyber theft as a means of economic survival. Motivation is not static. It responds to external pressures, including law enforcement actions, international agreements, and regulatory changes. For defenders, tracking these shifts is vital, as they influence which attacks are likely to rise or fall in prominence over time. Ultimately, defenders must learn to model attacker ROI just as businesses model investment decisions. By understanding what attackers gain compared to what they risk, organizations can better anticipate likely targets and vectors. If a particular asset offers high value to attackers with relatively low defensive barriers, it becomes an obvious point of concern. Prioritizing defenses based on attacker motivation ensures resources are allocated where they will make the most impact. In this sense, motivation analysis is not just theoretical, but directly actionable for security planning. Ecosystem-aware defense is the natural conclusion to this perspective. Just as attackers operate within networks of incentives, defenders must recognize the broader context. Countering ransomware requires addressing payment channels. Countering data theft requires disrupting resale markets. Motivation cannot be separated from the ecosystem that sustains it. A narrow focus on individual incidents misses the larger picture. Defenders who incorporate ecosystem awareness into their strategy are better prepared to anticipate and disrupt the full chain of attacker incentives, rather than just reacting to symptoms. The interplay between motive, capability, and opportunity provides a final lens for understanding attacker behavior. Motivation explains why attackers act, capability explains what they can do, and opportunity explains when and where they strike. Together, these factors create the conditions for an attack. Focusing on only one dimension gives an incomplete view, but analyzing all three provides a fuller understanding of risk. For defenders, recognizing this interplay is essential to developing strategies that anticipate not only what attackers might do, but why they will choose one path over another. In summary, ecosystem and economic drivers are key to understanding attacker motives. Financial profit, political goals, ideological beliefs, and personal grievances all interact with larger markets, tools, and opportunities. These motivations are not isolated. They evolve with technology, regulation, and global conditions. For defenders, the takeaway is clear. Tracking motivation is not just about labeling adversaries, but about anticipating how incentives shape the threat landscape. By understanding the why behind attacks, security professionals can build defenses that are proactive, strategic, and aligned with the realities of the cyber ecosystem. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.